Today we're going to go through the best ham radio products and electronics available on AliExpress. All of the products shown in this video will be linked in the description below, and the prices will be in US dollars. If you wish to change that, you can simply go to AliExpress here and select at the top your location that you can change to wherever you are, and down the bottom here select your currency, then click save. So this is the WinCamp AP8. This is a DC distribution or power splitter using Anderson power pole connectors. So this, you can see here, has 7 DC outputs, 1 DC input. Up to 40 amps of total current can pass through this distribution block. So you could use this in your ham Radio Shack for powering all of your different radios or different devices in your shack that run off 12 volts, for instance. If you go through here, I think there's 2 variations. There's the AP8S and then the AP8. Personally, I like these ones because you can actually screw these to a wall, whereas these ones are more sort of for a desktop that you could just sit there. However, in any case, you could run multiple radios off this. Here's a good little diagram demonstrating this with a power supply into the DC input, and then you've got your 3 radios here connected to various different outputs or more devices if you want. So the outputs with on the distribution block that have the different fuses here, you've got one which is a 40 amp fuse for the DC in. You've got 3 outputs here for 25 amps. You've got 2 outputs for 15 amps. You've got 1 output for 10 and an output for 5 amps. So you've got some various different current capacities for the devices that you can run off of those. So these are really handy. I've been moving everything over to power poles here in my ham Radio Shack, and it just makes things a lot more neater and a lot easier to be able to manage rather than having multiple cables all running to the same power supply. You can also get the Anderson power poles here. They're available also on AliExpress for around about $3 for a 10 pack. Now these come in different sizes. So you've got the 15 amp power poles, which accept 16 to 20 gauge wire. You've got the 30, which accept 12 to 16 gauge wire. And then you've also got the 45 amp, which accept 10 to 14 gauge wire. So depending on what size you need, I usually get one of each or a couple of packs of each because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be wiring up. They're really dirt cheap, and they're crimp connectors, so you do need a crimp tool to be able to do these. I also recommend a crimp tool which I get, which is on Amazon, and that is linked in the description below, just because it's the crimp tool that I use, which I know is tried and tested. I haven't got a crimp tool off of AliExpress before, but if you want a crimp tool, then there is a link below anyway for that. Now you can get tons and tons of handheld radios from AliExpress, and sometimes they'll vary in different quality and what you're actually going to get. But this is the one that I recommend for a lot of people if they're a beginner or even if they're just looking for their next handheld radio, because I absolutely love this radio. This is the TID Radio TD-H3. It comes in 3 different colors. You can either get black, you can get crystal or clear, and you can also get green as well. So this radio, I've done a video on this and I've reviewed this in the past. This is easy to program. You can program it over Bluetooth. You can program it using USB-C, directly plugged straight in. You can use Chirp to program it. You don't need, even with the USB-C, you don't need any extra cables. It's rechargeable over USB-C as well. And you can even from the front panel, it's also very easy to be able to operate. And it's got lots and lots of features. I think there's also open source firmware available for this radio too. Now for $28, that is an absolute steal with what you're getting. You're getting the radio, you're getting an antenna, you're getting a charger, which is a drop-in charger. You can also charge it directly, as I said, with USB-C, a battery, a belt clip, and you also get the manual. But the TD-H3 is one of the better handheld radios that I've had, definitely. Towards the end of this video, or at the end of this video, I'll put a link to the review of this radio if you want to find out more. But this is an awesomely cheap price for this radio, $28 on AliExpress. Now you can get a spectrum analyzer that fits into your pocket. That is the Tiny SA right here. Now this is the Tiny SA Ultra. This version does 100 kilohertz to 5.3 gigahertz. And this also is very handy for be able to testing your radios for spectral purity as well. So I use my Tiny SA for that. I'll also do a whole various other functions. I can use it for looking for interference. You can plug it into your computer so that you can actually look at the spectrum over a wider range as well using the PC. So for $116, this is an absolute steal for what you're getting. The Tiny SA is a great piece of test equipment that I think everyone should have. The Ultra, as I mentioned, goes all the way up to such a wide frequency range. It's got a 4-inch touchscreen. It's very similar to the Nano VNAs in their operation. So if you've ever used that before, mention PC controls. So if you want to be able to do some testing, it's also got an RF generator in it as well. So there's lots of different features. This one's got USB-C. I think the version that I had actually had a USB micro. So they've upgraded that. That must be an upgraded feature of this particular version. So $116 for a spectrum analyzer that basically fits into your pocket. You can do all sorts of things to be able to do testing on radios and be able to view the RF spectrum using this. So that is a great deal as well. Next up is the Web 888. This is a SDR that allows you to listen to 62 megahertz of bandwidth. Here it is here. I did a review video on this not that long ago. It is accessible using a web browser, software-defined radio, so you can put this literally anywhere in the world and access it as long as it's got internet. It does HF, it does VHF, and it is a great product. So these are available on AliExpress for around about $250. Lots of people have been enjoying using these to be able to get away from the noise, high noise levels. If they live in the city, be able to place these perhaps out somewhere remote and be able to remote in them. Other times they might even leave them at home too. So when they're traveling away, they can still listen and compare different signals that are coming into their home station while they're traveling. So there's all sorts of awesome stuff that's going on with this. There's also software, custom software that you can put onto this as well. And it's just, a great SDR to be able to have a bit of a play around with and to use for all different purposes. So if you want to learn more about this, again, I did do a video, so check that out on my channel. Next up is the Quanchang UV-K58. I've spoken about this a lot on my channel. This is, again, one of the better handheld radios, being open source and hackable. You can put custom firmware on this and do all sorts of different things. You can put a spectrum analyzer on the screen. You can play Pong. You can do everything with this radio. So when this came out, lots of people were really impressed with this. For $23, similar to the TID radio before, it uses USB-C. There's lots of different features. Heaps of people have been playing with this, been putting little mod boards in them so that it will receive HF as well. It does all sorts of things, not just VHF and UHF, just a standard handheld. So the UV-K5 is a great radio. Very versatile, and it's available on AliExpress for $23. I don't think I've seen it any cheaper than this. Before I mentioned about the Web 888 SDR, that's a little bit on the more expensive side for $240. Whilst it still has a whole heap of features, you could still use something like this, which is an RTL SDR. This is a version 4 dongle for $44, which is a USB dongle which you plug into an antenna. This is great if you're just a beginner and you want to have a bit of a play around with SDRs. I've done a series of SDR videos on my channel too, so if you want to learn more about this. But this is a great deal. It comes with quite a few of these different accessories. Looks like a little rabbit ears and all that sort of thing. That's probably not something that you're really going to use because you probably want to plug this into a better antenna, especially one that's outdoors. These dongles you can receive all the way up to 1.7 gigahertz, all the way down to 500 kilohertz. So you can view up to 2.4 megahertz of bandwidth. And these are great, especially if you just want to have a bit of a play around and you want to be able to see what you can receive in your local area. Now, next up, this is a UHF duplexer. This is required if you want to build a repeater system, a UHF repeater system. Now, I've picked this one out because This one will do 30 watts. It will also have, it's got end connectors here on the front too, and it will do this frequency range, which is 400 to 440 or 440 to 470. So it covers UHF 70 centimeter band and also the GMRS band in the US if you want to build a repeater on those. So it'll handle up to 30 watts. Now the key thing that we need to look at these is the frequency spacing. So this is the difference between the input and output of the repeater. On 70 centimeters on amateur radio, that is 5 megahertz, so it will do between 5 to 20 megahertz, and I think GMRS is similar as well. So these will do an isolation of up to 80 dB, so that means that the receiver and the transmitter will be isolated from one another. So for $95, this is a good deal for a cheap portable UHF repeater. I wouldn't use this necessarily on a proper repeater site because these only notch out the transmitter and receiver. They don't protect you from everything else, but that's an entirely different discussion already. This is a similar version. This is one of those, except this one is for VHF, and you can see there that it's got the low frequency of 156.155 and a high frequency of 161.855. So around about 5 odd megahertz of split. Now, because this is a VHF one, this won't do 2 meters because our 2 meter repeater splits are about 600 kilohertz. So they're not designed for that. But I thought I'd just point out quickly that this was designed, I tuned this so that it would pass on the low side 146, which is our input to our repeater. And then it would notch out a transmitter that was really nearby on 162.4 megahertz. So it's got 95 dB of notch. So that's just using this top side of the duplexer, and this side I just put a dummy load on. So that's a little bit more advanced, but if you want to learn actually more about this duplexer or other duplexers, then comment below in the video that you want to learn about the VHF duplexers or UHF duplexers, and I can do a video on those to show you more. Now, these days, we're absolutely riddled with noise coming from pretty much everything in our house, and these things have become invaluable to try and suppress and beat these noise levels down. This is a 22-piece, or you can also buy a 50-piece toroid ferrite snap-on clip ring, whatever you want to call it, filter kit. Now, this is good because I thought there's lots and lots of different ferrite clamps here with different sizes available in this kit. If you scroll down here, they've got a list of all of the different sizes, 3.5 millimeter, 5, 7, 9, 13. So these will be used in your most common scenarios for network cables, for HDMI leads, for audio leads, all sorts of different things. You could snap them over coax as well. Now, the only thing about this kit is that it doesn't detail what particular mix these ferrites are. However, you know, these is a good price, $8 for 22 of these for the most common things that you could snap over the top of, like your audio cables and your HDMI cables and stuff that you're not really, you just sort of, or power cables as well. You just sort of need a generic snap-on suppressor cable, then these may indeed help to get rid of some of that interference. So I just thought it was good because it was, less than like 40 cents for every ferrite. So it might save you in the long run. Now, I've done a series of videos on SDRs, and one of the things that I had in those was one of these, a little low noise amplifier. This does 0.1 of a megahertz up to 6 gigahertz, 50 ohms. It's got an SMA on each side, RF in, RF out, 5 volts over that micro USB. They do have one with a battery option. I think this one doesn't have a battery in it, but this is a good little low noise, wideband low noise amplifier, which you can use for as an alternative to some of the other LNAs that you can get out here. These are great, and they're really cheap. So if you blow them up, if you're transmitting too close to them or something happens, then you blow them up, then they're only $12 to replace. Now, many of you who have seen my SDR series will realize how much of an advantage it is having a low noise amplifier on your SDR. So if you want to learn more about those, then go out and check my series. But for $12 for this LNA. It's got a very ultra low noise figure as well of 0.4 of a dB at 1.95 gigs. It's got heaps of gain, almost too much gain, 20 dB of gain. But this is a great deal for a small little LNA. And I came across one of these recently, which I had an issue at one of my repeater sites where I had a GPS receiver getting absolutely swamped and overloaded by other RF broadcast signals. So I bought one of these. This is a little bandpass filter for a GPS. This passes DC, so it can power an active antenna, but it basically is a little filter that you put in front of your GPS so that the GPS doesn't get overloaded, and it GPS operates on 1575 megahertz, so it is filtered for that. $15, and that fixed my problem. So if you're finding that you're running a GPS in your ham Radio Shack or for whatever other project that you're running it on, and you're getting frequent dropouts, then you might want to look at something like this to be able to filter out everything else except for the GPS signal, helping with that front end overload so that it's not getting absolutely smashed by other transmitters. Now, if you do need an antenna, this is a great antenna. There's 3 different versions of this antenna. This will do the GPS signals, GLONASS signals, everything around 1500 megs for $7. There's 3 versions here. They come with an SMA male plug on the end. You've got the screw version here with an M12 bolt, so you could screw it into something. You can also have a magnetic mount as well here with an SMA male on the other end with 3 meters of cable. Or there is also another screw mount here with this different connector here on the end, but it's mainly the 2 SMA ones. But for $7, that is a great deal for a GPS outdoor rated antenna as well, I should mention. So I use these antennas all the time. They on my repeater sites. I use the magnetic ones. Here's all the specs on them and shows you some of the patterns as well. But I run these, again, as I mentioned, on my repeater sites, and they're outdoors. They're stuck on a magnetic mount up on the roof, and I have no issues with being able to get enough GPS signal. And you can also get power supplies off of AliExpress, and sometimes they're for voltages that you wouldn't normally expect. So I got one of these, a 28 volt. I actually got the 6 amp version here, and I use this to power one of my preamplifiers on 1.2 gigahertz. Sorry, not preamplifiers, power amplifiers on 1.2 gigahertz, which is 50 watts. And these work incredibly well. Here it is. This is, of course, open frame. So you do need to put this into another box and wire it all up and put appropriate fuses, and of course be careful. You don't really want to just run it like this because it is all exposed. This one here is one of the spare ones that I've got. I got the other one that is in a box with the amplifier, but 28 volts at 6 amps. Now, I'm not sure exactly how RF quiet these things are, especially if they're just like this. They're probably not that RF quiet. However, it didn't really worry me in this application because I was running this on 1.2 gigahertz, and that's normally not a band that's going to be affected too much by RF. And when I've used this, it doesn't seem to, I can't really pick up any interference. But there's some cheap power supplies from AliExpress, only $17 for one of those. You can get them in a variety of different amperages and also different voltages as well, so like 50 volts, and if you go here and change your different current ratings, you can then go 50, 32, 30, 28. Now, one of the other things that I do is run portable PODA, and I have a Mad Dog coil. Now, in the top of that Mad Dog coil, I've got one of these. This is a stainless steel whip. It has a M10 connection here on the back, M10 thread, and this is a telescopic whip that will go up to 5.3 or 5.28 meters. And here it actually is here. You've got the thread on the end. You've got the telescopic whip section that you can do all the way up and adjust for the best SWR on top of your coil that you might be running. If you're running a ground spike or something, these also work too for your vertical radiator element. So I've got this. If you want to learn more about the Mad Dog coil in particular, the specific coil that I run this on, then I have done a video on that. But these are $20 on AliExpress, so they're real cheap. They are a little bit flimsy on the top, so they can get broken if you're whipping them around. If they whip into a tree or something, or they fall, then they can break. So it's probably a good idea to get maybe a second one just in case you do break it. But these are the specific whips that I use. And you can also get them, if you look around on AliExpress, if you don't need that sort of long, they do come in different lengths as well. But this is, 13 sections, and it packs all the way down into this small, half a meter size, which is really good for being able to pack away and take somewhere. This is probably one of the cheapest Baofeng programming cables that I've ever seen. $2.60 for a Baofeng programming cable is very, very cheap. This will program a lot of your Baofeng radios, the UV5R, the Quansheng radio, pretty much anything that's got one of these little 2-pin connectors here. And the software that I recommend you use is Chirp. It's a free download. You can go in, use this, plug this cable in. At least with the computer that I've got, all I did was I just plugged this in, plugged it into my radio, opened up Chirp, programmed it, and away I went. So $2.60 for this programming cable is a great deal indeed. So the next deal is one of these, a ICOM power cable. These are, well, they're not just ICOM, they're also Yaesu and Kenwood use these, the 4-pin power connector. I got one of these because I was using my IC7300 in different scenarios when portable, and I was disconnecting it in the shack, and then I was going portable and having to pull the cable with me and then re-put it back into the shack again and going back and forth, and it was just frustrating. So I bought another cable and found this one on AliExpress for $6, which is the one that I just showed you. This will do, as I mentioned, not only the 7300, but also the IC7000, FT991, a couple of Kenwoods as well, all of the ones that use this common 4-pin connector. Now, I showed the Tiny SA Ultra earlier. This is the Nano VNA. These are awesome little pieces of kit for being able to test SWR on antennas. You can test complex impedances. I've done a video testing toroids, actually. We mentioned toroids earlier, testing toroids on that. So Nano VNAs, this is the H4. This is $52 on AliExpress, the version 4. And this is a great deal. Again, I mentioned about test equipment in the shack. This will do all the way up to 1.5 gigahertz. You can plug this into your computer and run testing. Even if it's just, if you're looking like for something to test your antennas, for say an SWR, rather than getting an SWR meter, you can get one of these and you can tell so much more. There's lots of different tutorials on the internet of how to use these, but for $52, that is a great deal for essentially a piece of test equipment that every amateur radio operator should have in their shack. And this is a Nagoya NA771. I recommend that if you buy a handheld radio, this is actually a BNC version, if you buy a handheld radio to throw out the stock antenna that it comes with and replace it with one of these antennas, these will work so much better than the stock antenna that they come with. This is $18. This is the original, an original like this. This is a genuine Nagoya that I've got in my hand. $18 for a genuine Nagoya. They come with different connectors. So this one is an SMA female on the end, so you might need to go for a bit of a search to try and find one for the correct antenna or the correct connector for your radio. So you can either get two for $18 or one for $10. So these are a great upgrade to the antenna, stock antenna on your handheld radios. There are some links in the description below, as I mentioned before. There is also a generic AliExpress link, so if you want to purchase anything from AliExpress and you want to support the channel, then you can use those. It doesn't change any cost to you, but it does help me in this channel and supports it, so I really appreciate it if you use those. I mentioned some of the products that I used earlier on in the video that I've done some reviews on them, such as the Web 888 or a couple of those handheld radios. Those videos will appear over here if you want to learn about those in more detail.